Welcome to Heartfelt Revenge Stories. There are moments in life so small, so ordinary, that you would never guess they could save your life. For me, that moment was a Thursday evening in October when I simply forgot to mention one thing to my daughter. Just one thing. And that one forgotten detail changed everything. My name is Margaret. I am 62 years old. I spent 35 years as a nurse at St. Grace Hospital, fighting for lives that weren't always mine to save. I have held the hands of dying strangers. I have delivered news that broke families apart. I have seen the very worst and the very best of what human beings are capable of. But nothing in all those years prepared me for what I was about to discover inside my own home. Before I go any further, I just want to say something from the bottom of my heart. If you are here, if you are listening to this, thank you. Truly. Please subscribe and like this video and listen to my story till the end and let me know which city you're listening from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled. Because what I went through, I believe with everything in me that someone out there needs to hear it. Now, let me take you back to that Thursday. I had spent 3 hours that afternoon bent over the junction box in my garage, tracing burnt wiring with hands that still remembered every procedure I had ever performed. My security cameras had been dark for 2 weeks after a power surge fried the old system. And I, being who I am, a woman who built her own raised garden beds at 58 and rewired her own porch light at 60, was not about to pay someone $200 for a job I could handle myself. My knees were not happy about it. Oh, they let me know. Every time I knelt on that concrete floor, they screamed at me like old friends with very strong opinions. But by 5 o'clock that Thursday, every single camera was recording in crisp, beautiful clarity, uploading directly to the cloud storage I had set up years ago when break-ins started becoming a problem in our neighborhood in Portland. I washed the grease from my hands, dried them on the old kitchen towel hanging by the sink, and started making dinner. My daughter, Sophie, had called earlier in the week asking if she and her husband could come by for our usual Thursday meal. Of course I said yes. She was 34. An elementary school teacher. She had her father's eyes and her grandmother's smile and a laugh that used to fill every room she walked into. Her husband, Daniel, worked as a business consultant at a firm downtown. He was polished and well-spoken and always said the right things at the right moments. They arrived just before 6. Daniel carried a bottle of wine. Sophie kissed my cheek the way she had since she was old enough to reach my face. We settled around the kitchen table, and the house smelled the way it always did when they came over. Like pot roast and coffee and something close to normal. The conversation was easy at first. She talked about a little boy in her class who had started reading 2 grades above his level. Daniel complained about his demanding boss in that way he always did, half laughing, half exasperated. I refilled the water glasses and listened and felt, just for a little while, like everything was fine. Then, halfway through dinner, Sophie looked up from her plate and asked me a question. "Mom, have you updated your will recently?" I set down my fork. "Not since your father passed." "Why do you ask?" She exchanged a glance with Daniel. It was quick. The kind of glance that people think no one notices. Then she smiled in a way that was just slightly, just barely off. "Oh, no real reason. I just want to make sure everything is in order. You know, in case anything happens." Daniel nodded, swirling his wine. "Life insurance, the house title. It is important to have these things documented properly." A small knot formed in my stomach. I pushed it aside. She was my daughter. Of course she cared about my well-being. "Everything is fine," I told her. "My attorney handled all the paperwork after your father died." The conversation moved on. But the question lingered. It sat at the back of my mind like a splinter I couldn't quite reach. Then my neighbor Grace called. A pipe had burst in her basement. She was 71, she lived alone, and her voice was shaking. I could not ignore that. I grabbed my coat and apologized to Sophie and Daniel. "Go, Mom," Sophie said warmly. "We'll clean up." I rushed out the door. And in all the chaos of burst pipes and shut-off valves and soaked laundry room floors, I completely forgot. I forgot to tell them the cameras were working again. I came home an hour later to an empty house. They had washed the dishes and left a thank you note on the counter. Sweet. Thoughtful. Everything a mother could want. I locked the front door and stood in the quiet kitchen. Something felt wrong. I couldn't name it. I just stood there in the silence and felt it. That low hum beneath my ribs that 35 years of nursing had taught me never to ignore. Tomorrow, I told myself. Tomorrow I would call Sophie and mention the cameras. Tomorrow I would ask gently why she seemed so interested in my insurance policies. But tomorrow was going to bring answers I was not ready for. The next afternoon, Friday, just past 2 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Sophie stood on my porch in her weekend jeans and a soft blue cardigan, holding a thermos and a tin of homemade cookies, smiling that wide, easy smile. I had some free time, she said, stepping inside before I had quite finished opening the door. Thought we could have tea together. Just the two of us like we used to. Something about her voice was slightly too bright, too rehearsed. But I dismissed it. This was my daughter. We had shared 100 afternoons like this when she was younger, her curled up on the sofa telling me about her week, about her friends, about everything. She moved into my kitchen with the easy confidence of someone who had grown up there. Found my favorite mug without looking. Added exactly the right amount of honey. You always remember how I like it, I said. Of course, Mom. She handed me the mug and sat across from me. You took care of me my whole life. The least I can do is make you a decent cup of tea. We talked about nothing important. Her students. The weather. A new restaurant downtown she wanted to try. She was animated and warm and funny, and I felt myself relax completely. Maybe I had misread last night. Maybe her questions about the will had been nothing more than innocent concern. I sipped the tea. It was perfect. And then at exactly 2:30 the room began to tilt. I gripped the edge of the table. My vision blurred at the corners. My muscles went soft and heavy, like they were dissolving from the inside out. I tried to speak, but my tongue felt thick and clumsy and far away. Mom? Sophie's voice came from somewhere distant and muffled. Mom, are you okay? The floor came up to meet me. When I opened my eyes, the light in the room had changed. Long shadows. The clock on the wall read 6:15. 4 hours had passed. Sophie was sitting beside me on the sofa, her face arranged in perfect worry, her hand wrapped around mine. Thank God, she breathed. You scared me to death, Mom. I blinked, trying to pull my thoughts together. My mouth was dry. My limbs felt like wet cement. What happened? She stroked my hair gently. You don't remember? You told me this morning you accidentally took your sleeping pills. I think you were still groggy when I got here. You just collapsed, honey. I stared at her. I didn't take any pills. Her expression deepened into something that looked almost like pity. Mom, you did. You told me. I'm worried. Memory lapses like this, they can be serious. Maybe we should see a neurologist. I did not take any pills, I said again. She pressed me back against the cushions. Just rest. We'll figure this out together. After she left, I lay in the growing dark, staring at the ceiling. I knew with absolute certainty that I had not taken any medication that morning. 35 years managing patient medications. I never missed. I never confused. I was meticulous because lives depended on it. But my body told a different story. The heavy limbs. The blurred vision. The slurred speech. The hours of unconsciousness I could not account for. These were not symptoms of confusion or age. These were signs of a drug overdose. I forced myself up and went to the kitchen. The trash was empty. She had taken it out before she left. But when I checked the recycling bin, I found my favorite mug, rinsed clean, sitting at the bottom. I lifted it to the light. A faint white residue clung to the inside. My hands were shaking as I sealed it inside a plastic bag. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the sealed mug in front of me, caught between two possibilities so unbearable I could barely breathe. Either I was losing my mind, or my daughter had just tried to poison me. If you are still with me right now, if your heart is pounding even a little bit, comment the word Margaret below. Let me know you are here. Because this story is not over, and what I found on those cameras the next morning. I still cannot think about it without my chest going tight. Saturday morning. 9 o'clock. I sat down in front of my security monitor, hands wrapped around a cold cup of coffee, telling myself I was going to prove I was wrong, that I was going to watch that footage and find nothing, that my daughter, my child, my Sophie, could not have done what every instinct in my body was screaming at me. I pulled up Friday's footage and pressed play, and my world ended. Come back for part 2, because what I heard those cameras record inside my own home will change the way you look at everyone around you. Welcome back. If you are just joining us, my name is Margaret. I am 62 years old. My daughter came to my home on Friday afternoon with a thermos of chamomile tea and a tin of homemade cookies. And I woke up 4 hours later on my own sofa not knowing how I had gotten there. Saturday morning, I sat down in front of my security monitor. I told myself I was going to watch the footage and find nothing wrong. I told myself I was a mother who loved her daughter, and mothers like me do not spy and do not suspect and do not let fear turn them into something paranoid and small. I pressed play. I watched myself collapse. What happened next made the blood drain from my face. Sophie did not rush to help me. She did not call for an ambulance. She did not even kneel down immediately. She stood there in the middle of my kitchen and she checked her watch. She waited a full minute. Then she crouched beside me, checked my pulse with the kind of clinical detachment I had only ever seen in medical professionals, and pulled out her phone. Not to call 911. To send a text message. I sat frozen in my chair, staring at the screen, unable to breathe. But that was not the worst of it. I scrolled backward through the recording, all the way back to 10:15 Friday morning, while I had been at the grocery store. And there they were, Sophie and Daniel, inside my house, moving through the room slowly and carefully, checking every corner. Daniel stopped in the hallway and gestured toward one of the cameras. His face was cautious, calculating. I turned up the volume. "Are these things still broken?" Sophie asked, looking directly at the lens without the faintest flicker of hesitation. Daniel examined the camera closely. "She hasn't mentioned fixing them. I think we're good." "Good." Sophie walked to the kitchen window, peered out to check for my car. "Yesterday's test run worked perfectly. She was out for hours." "The dosage is right then," Daniel said. His voice was calm, almost bored, like a project manager reviewing a quarterly report. "Next time needs to be the final one." I gripped the edge of the desk so hard my knuckles went white. "The break plan will be cleaner," Sophie continued. "It will look like an accident, especially with the medical history we're building. Memory loss, confusion. By the time she's gone, everyone will just think it was inevitable." Daniel pulled a small notebook from his pocket and wrote something down. "I'm documenting everything. Medication mix-ups, disorientation, the whole picture. When it happens, no one will question it." There was a pause. Then he added, almost as an afterthought, "I have done this before. You know. Trust me. If we are careful, no one suspects a thing." Sophie smiled. "I know. That is why I married you." They both laughed. I watched that footage 4 times. The 4th time, something inside me shifted. The grief was still there, a hollow weight that filled my chest like concrete. But underneath it, something else had begun to grow. Something sharper. Something that had kept me alive through 35 years of emergencies and codes and patients who should not have survived but did. I was not going to be a victim in my own home. I copied the footage to cloud storage, to 3 separate external drives, to a hidden folder on my laptop. I labeled everything with dates and timestamps. If something happened to me, this evidence would not disappear. By noon on Saturday, I had made 3 phone calls that would save my life. The first went to Patricia Wells, an attorney who had been a friend since our years volunteering together at St. Grace Hospital. She specialized in elder law and had one of the sharpest minds I had ever encountered. When she answered and I told her what I had found, there was a brief pause. "Come to my office right now," she said. By 2 o'clock, I was sitting across from her desk with a laptop between us, showing her the footage. Patricia watched every second without speaking. When it ended, she closed the laptop and looked at me with an expression that was not shock. It was the face of someone who had seen terrible things before and was now very, very focused. "This is textbook financial elder abuse combined with conspiracy to commit harm," she said. "You have audio, video, and physical evidence. Most victims never get this far." Most victims, I thought. Because most victims do not live long enough. Patricia picked up her phone. "I know someone in the Elder Crimes Unit." The second call connected us to Detective Rosa Sanchez. By 4 o'clock, she was sitting in Patricia's office reviewing everything. She was in her early 40s with sharp, quiet eyes that moved over the evidence the way a surgeon's hands move, deliberate, nothing wasted. "This is the most comprehensive documentation I have seen in my entire career," she said, rewinding the footage to replay Daniel's voice. "I have done this before." She turned to me. Mrs. Harlow, I need to ask. Are you willing to let this play out? To act normal while we build a case? I thought of Sophie sitting beside me on the sofa, stroking my hair, watching me with false worry in her eyes. Yes, I said. Whatever it takes. Detective Sanchez laid out the plan with the precision of someone who had done this before and intended to do it flawlessly. I would go home. I would act normal. She would fast-track the teacup to the lab, priority evidence in a conspiracy case, with results in 72 hours. Meanwhile, a full background check on Daniel. Patricia leaned forward and began outlining the legal framework. Restraining orders. Power of attorney protections. Everything needed to keep my assets and my medical decisions out of their reach. For the first time since I had found that footage, I felt something other than fear and grief. I felt purpose. Sunday passed in heavy silence. I reviewed footage. I backed up files. I practiced looking normal in the mirror. Monday night at 2 a.m, the camera above my garage recorded Daniel walking up my driveway with a flashlight and a small toolbox. I did not see it until Tuesday morning. He crouched beneath my car for 15 minutes. The garage camera caught his face perfectly. The concentration. The deliberate movements. The careful, practiced hands of a man who had done this before. When he stood up and walked away, wiping his hands on a rag, I felt my stomach drop. At 8 o'clock Tuesday morning, Sophie called. Mom. Her voice was bright, cheerful, full of warmth. I was thinking, why don't we have lunch today? There's that lovely place up at Mountain View Lodge. We could go at 12:30. Mountain View Lodge. 25 miles of winding mountain road. Steep drop-offs on either side. That sounds wonderful, sweetheart, I heard myself say. After I hung up, I went outside and knelt beside my car, ignoring the protests from my knees. I found it immediately. Brake fluid pooling slowly on the concrete beneath the chassis, dripping from a line that had been cut with a clean, deliberate, professional precision. This was not a natural leak. By 9 o'clock, my mechanic of 10 years, a kind man named Frank, was sliding beneath my vehicle. When he came out, his face was grim. Mrs. Harlow, he said slowly, your brake line has been partially cut. Designed to fail after 15 to 20 minutes of driving. On those mountain roads. He shook his head. You would not have stood a chance. Someone tried to end your life. This was the second attempt. The T had been a test. This was meant to finish the job. I called Sophie back. Sweetheart, I'm so sorry, my car is having some trouble. Could you come over? I might need a ride. I wanted to see her face. I needed to witness the performance. Of course, Mom. I'll be right there. At 11, I watched on the security monitor as she stood on my porch. And for just 1 second, one unguarded second before she thought anyone was watching, her face was completely blank. Empty. Like a mask resting on a shelf. Then she arranged it. Warm concern. Gentle worry. The devoted daughter. She pressed the doorbell. She was good. Very good. But I was better. Because this time I was not the one lying unconscious on the floor. This time I was the audience. And I knew exactly what kind of show I was watching. Are you okay? Because I am still sitting with the weight of this even now. If you are here with me, leave the word strong in the comments. You are going to want to stay for part 3. Because what Sophie said when she walked through my door next. Oh, it still makes my whole body go cold. Sophie walked into my living room. She took my hands. Tears formed in her eyes immediately. And then she said something that told me everything. She told me she was worried. She said it was terrifying. She said someone must have tried to poison me with sleeping medication. But I had never said a word about medication. Not one word. Part 3 is coming. And things are about to escalate in ways I could never have imagined. She walked through my front door like a woman who had done nothing wrong in her entire life. Mom, what happened? Are you okay? Her hands gripped mine. Her eyes filled with tears. Her husband Daniel followed close behind, his face arranged in careful, practiced worry. This is serious, he said. We should call the police right away. I let them settle into the living room. I watched them the way I used to watch monitors at St. Grace, looking for the thing that would tell me what was really happening underneath the surface. The mechanic said someone deliberately cut my brake line, I said calmly. Sophie's hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God, Mom. This is terrifying. First, someone tried to poison you with sleeping medication and now. She stopped mid-sentence. The room went very still. I tilted my head just slightly. I never said anything about being poisoned, sweetheart. You told me I had forgotten my medication. I never confirmed that. The silence that followed was the kind that changes things permanently. Daniel stepped in smoothly. I think what she means is, with everything that has been happening, your confusion about the medication, and now this, it feels like someone is targeting you. Does it? I said. Sophie recovered quickly. Her eyes went soft with something that looked almost like love. Mom, I am just so worried. This neighborhood isn't safe anymore. You shouldn't be alone. Come stay with us for a few days. Until the police figure out what's going on. I am safe in my own home, I said. Another glance between them. 1 second. But I caught it. The recalculation. Well, if you change your mind. Daniel stood, smoothed his jacket. We are here for you. Whatever you need. I know you are, I said. After they left, I stood at the window and watched them sit in their car for 10 minutes. Through the glass I could see the argument. Sharp gestures. Tense postures. Her hands moving fast. His knuckles white on the steering wheel. They knew I was suspicious. They could either retreat or they could move faster. I was betting on faster. My phone rang just as their car finally pulled away. Mrs. Harlow? Detective Sanchez's voice was serious in a way that tightened my chest immediately. We have the lab results from your teacup. The lab rushed it through faster than expected. I sat down slowly. What did they find? 15 milligrams of zolpidem, she said. That is triple the normal therapeutic dose. For someone your age and weight, that amount could have stopped your breathing entirely. She paused. Mrs. Harlow, your daughter was not testing a dosage. She was attempting to end your life. I closed my eyes. Somewhere deep inside, a small stubborn part of me had still been holding on to the possibility that I was wrong. That there was an explanation. That my child could not truly want me gone. There is more, Sanchez continued. The background check on Daniel came back. Can you come to the station this afternoon? By 1 o'clock, I was sitting across from Detective Sanchez in a windowless room at the police station. A thick manila folder open on the table between us. She walked me through everything without softening it. The lab results. The dosage. The implications. Then she turned to the background check. His sealed juvenile record was opened under court order. At 17, he was convicted of financial fraud targeting an elderly neighbor. He convinced her to sign over property deeds. The charges were reduced because of his age. The record was sealed when he turned 18. I stared at the papers. A pattern. This was not opportunism. This was a pattern that had started before he was even an adult. Sanchez flipped to another page. In 2019, a 73-year-old woman named Helen Bryce died in Tacoma. The death was ruled a medication overdose, classified as a suicide. Daniel was her financial advisor. He inherited $60,000. Tacoma PD is reopening the case. She looked at me steadily. Mrs. Harlow, your son-in-law is not an opportunist. He is a serial predator who targets vulnerable seniors. I thought of my daughter sitting in my living room. I thought of the way she had laughed on that footage. The way she had said, I know. That is why I married him. We have enough to arrest them both right now, Sanchez said. Conspiracy. Attempted harm. Tampering with your vehicle. No. She raised an eyebrow. If you arrest them now, they get lawyers. They plead down. In 10 years, they are out looking for another vulnerable person. I want them caught in the act. I want a confession. I want them put away so they can never do this to anyone else. Sanchez studied me for a long moment. You understand that means you'll have to be bait. I have faced death in intensive care units more times than I can count, I said. This is just another emergency. Except this time I am both the patient and the nurse. She exhaled slowly, then nodded. All right. Here is how we do this. 2 days of preparation that felt like preparing for battle. A recording device small enough to fit inside a pendant necklace. A panic button concealed in my watch. Tactical teams positioned around Sophie and Daniel's neighborhood. Invisible and ready. And one code word. My husband's name. Thomas. Just once. And 12 officers would come through those doors. Patricia leaned forward. Margaret, we already have enough. You do not have to do this. Yes, I said. I do. Thursday evening, Sophie called. Mom, I am so excited. I am making the pot roast right now. The whole house smells amazing. I'll bring wine, I offered. Oh, do not worry about that, she said, and her voice was so warm, so genuinely cheerful that my breath caught. We have your favorite already. That Merlot you love from 2016. We already opened it to let it breathe. Already opened. Already breathing. I wrote it down. Already poisoned, most likely. That is so thoughtful, sweetheart, I said. I cannot wait. Thursday night. Final briefing. Detective Sanchez fitted the wire herself, testing it 3 times. We rehearsed scenarios. What to say. How to position myself. How to keep them talking. Get them to say what they are doing and why, she said. We need clear verbal acknowledgement. I nodded. That night I could not sleep. At 3 in the morning I sat in my living room holding a photograph of Thomas, taken the summer before he died. We were standing in front of this house. The house we had built together, raised our daughter and grown old inside. I am scared, I whispered to the photograph. But I am ready. And if this is how my story ends, at least I fought back. Friday morning. I dressed carefully. A simple blouse. Comfortable slacks. I taped the recording device to my chest, checked the panic button, and practiced speaking naturally while wearing the wire. I wrote a letter to Grace and sealed it in an envelope. Left it on the kitchen counter. If you are reading this, something went wrong. The cloud storage password is Thomas1965. Do not let them hurt anyone else. The longest 12 hours of my life began. Oh my goodness, if you are still here, I need you to just breathe for a second. Comment the word fight below if you would do the same thing. Because tonight is the night everything comes to a head, and what Sophie says to me at that dinner table. It will break your heart into pieces. At 6:30 Friday evening, I backed out of my driveway. 3 unmarked cars followed at a distance. Detective Sanchez's voice came through the wire, soft and steady. We are right here with you, Margaret. But when I turned into my daughter's driveway at 5 to 7 and saw her standing in the warm light of her front door, smiling like she had never done anything wrong in her entire life, I have never felt more alone. Part 4. The dinner. The confession. And the moment my daughter looked me in the eyes and told me exactly what she thought of me. I am warning you now. It is not easy to hear. The house smelled like slow-cooked beef and red wine and something that should have felt like home but felt instead like a stage set. The dining table was laid with formal china, candles flickering in crystal holders, cloth napkins folded like swans. Everything perfect. Everything too perfect. Daniel emerged from the kitchen wiping his hands on an apron. Margaret. So glad you could make it. We have your favorite Merlot, the 2016, the year you and Thomas celebrated your 30th anniversary. He gestured toward the open bottle on the table. I'll just have water for now, I said, settling into my chair. You know I'm on medication. A flicker of something crossed Sophie's face. Gone in less than a second. Of course, Mom. Whatever you're comfortable with. The first course came and went. The conversation was light. Her students. His work. All perfectly normal. Except nothing was normal. This house is really too big for one person, Sophie said, refilling her own wine glass. Have you thought about downsizing? I am managing just fine. But what if you fall? What if something happens and no one knows? I have my security system, I said evenly. And Grace still checks on me regularly. Daniel leaned back in his chair. About Grace. At your age, health emergencies can come out of nowhere. One day you are perfectly fine. The next day you are in the hospital. It is almost like someone flipped a switch. He smiled as he said it. It certainly can happen that way, I agreed, looking directly at him. One day you are perfectly fine. The next day someone ends up in the hospital. It is almost like it was planned. The table went quiet. The main course arrived. Pot roast braised in wine sauce. It smelled wonderful and I knew with everything in me that I could not touch it. I will skip the sauce, I said. My doctor has me avoiding alcohol completely right now. Mom. Sophie's voice carried an edge I had never heard from her before, or maybe I had just never let myself recognize it. You are being difficult. He spent all day making this. I am not being difficult. I am being careful. 35 years as a nurse taught me to know exactly what I am putting into my body. The room went cold. For one unguarded second, Sophie's mask slipped. Raw fury crossed her face. Then the warmth returned, slow and deliberate, like someone pulling a curtain back into place. Mom, she said softly, dangerously, we need to talk about something important. Daniel stood, walked to the sideboard, and returned with a manila folder. We have been thinking about your future, Sophie said, and we want to make sure you are protected. Inside the folder were property transfer documents, account access forms, medical proxy papers. Every asset I owned, every decision about my health and my home, all of it transferring to Sophie. Just a precaution, she said, in case your memory gets worse. I looked at those papers for a long moment. Then I pushed them back across the table. I will not sign this. Sophie's smile froze. Mom, you are not thinking clearly. This is to protect you. No. I said it quietly, but every word landed like a stone. This is to protect you. Your finances. When I am gone. The silence that followed was the most dangerous silence I have ever sat in. My son-in-law placed both hands flat on the table. That is a serious accusation. I pulled out my phone. I pressed play. Their voices filled the dining room, sharp and unmistakable. The dosage worked perfectly. She was out for hours. Next time needs to be the final one. The break plan will be cleaner. It will look like an accident. Sophie's face drained of every trace of color. Daniel lunged forward. Where did you get those? The cameras, I said. I repaired them 2 weeks ago. Thursday, October 14th. I forgot to mention it. I let the next clip play. I have done this before. Trust me, if we are careful, no one suspects a thing. I looked at Daniel. Tacoma, 2019. A woman named Helen Bryce. You drugged her. Staged it as a suicide. Took $60,000. He stood completely still. His face was a mask of cold, controlled rage. Give me that phone. Sit down, I said. Or I say one word and 12 officers surrounding this house come through those doors in 5 seconds. He did not sit. But he did not move closer. Sophie found her voice. Her whole body was shaking. Not with fear. With fury. That is taken out of context. You do not understand. I played the last clip. Build the medical history. Memory loss. Confusion. By the time she is gone, everyone will believe it was inevitable. What context, I asked quietly, makes any of that acceptable? She laughed. It was a terrible sound. Brittle and jagged, like something breaking that was never meant to break. Fine. You want the truth? The mask fell away completely. And the woman looking at me from across that candlelit table was not the child I had raised. She was a stranger wearing my daughter's face. Yes, we planned it. Yes, we tried. And do you know what, Mom? She leaned forward. You deserved it. The words hit me like a physical blow. Deserved it? You are sitting on nearly $1 million in assets. That house. The life insurance. Your retirement accounts. You are 62 years old and healthy, and you are going to live another 20 years while we are drowning. Do you have any idea what it is like watching you hold on to everything we could use right now? I gave you everything, I whispered. I raised you. I loved you. I would have given you anything if you had just asked. Asked? She laughed again, and it was the most painful sound I have ever heard. You would have lectured me about responsibility, about living within your means, about how you and Dad built everything from nothing. I am tired of the lectures, Mom. I am tired of waiting for you to do something useful and just go away. So yes, we drugged you. We cut your brake line. We tested doses on your neighbor. And we would have succeeded if you had not been so paranoid about those cameras. She stood up. Her chair scraped across the floor. But we still have time. You are here. The doors are locked. She smiled. You're all alone. Aren't you, Mom? And then I said it. I looked directly at the pendant around my neck. And I spoke clearly and calmly into the wire hidden beneath my blouse. Detective, I think you have heard enough. One frozen second. Comprehension dawning on their faces. Then the doors exploded inward. Police. Hands up. Get on the ground. Now. The tactical team moved with a precision and speed that took my breath away. Sophie and Daniel were on the floor in seconds, hands behind their backs, faces pressed against the carpet. Detective Sanchez entered, her expression grim and deeply satisfied. She began reading them their rights while I stood pressed against the wall, watching my daughter in handcuffs. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can, and will be used against you in a court of law. Sophie turned her head. She looked at me one last time. Not with love. Not with remorse. With pure undiluted hatred. I should have used more poison, she whispered. An officer pulled her to her feet and led her toward the door. Sanchez came to me. Mrs. Harlow, are you all right? I nodded. But I could not speak. We got everything, she said quietly. Every word. The confession. The amounts. His admission about other victims. It is over. But standing in that dining room, watching my daughter disappear through the doorway in handcuffs, I felt the full weight of something I had known and refused to accept for days now. I had lost her long before tonight. Maybe I had never truly had her at all. I need to ask you something, and I truly want to know. If you were sitting at that table, hearing your own child say those words, what would you do? Would you run? Would you forgive? Would you fight? Tell me in the comments. I am not judging. I genuinely want to know. The arrests were made. The evidence was sealed. But the story was far from over. Because on Saturday morning, Detective Sanchez called with the lab results from Friday's dinner. The wine contained 2.5 milligrams of digoxin. The pot roast sauce had another milligram. Total dose, 3.5 milligrams. Enough to cause cardiac arrest within 2 hours. If I had eaten that meal and drunk that wine, I would have been gone before midnight. And then the detectives found the notebook. A handwritten timeline. My daughter had scheduled her grief. She had calculated her profit. She had planned my funeral before I was dead. Part 5 is the last part. And it is where I tell you what I did with all of this pain. Because I refused to let it be the end of my story. Patricia drove me home at 9 o'clock Friday night. My hands were too unsteady to hold the steering wheel. The streets outside the car window looked impossibly ordinary, lit by streetlights and the glow of living room windows, people going about their evenings with no idea that somewhere across this city, a daughter who had planned her mother's death was being booked into a holding cell. What happens now? I asked. Arraignment on Monday, Patricia said. With the flight risk and severity of the charges, they will not get bail. Trial in about 6 months. 6 months. Saturday morning, Detective Sanchez called with the lab results from the dinner. The Merlot contained 2.5 milligrams of digoxin. The pot roast sauce contained another milligram. Total dose, 3.5 milligrams. Cardiac arrest within 2 hours. Eleanor, if you had consumed that meal, you would not have survived the night. I sat down slowly, the phone pressed against my ear. Saturday afternoon, the search warrant results came in. They found a bottle of digoxin purchased illegally. Fake medical records in my name documenting progressive dementia. Life insurance paperwork with a forged signature. And the notebook. Sanchez read it to me over the phone, her voice tight with anger. October 15th. Dosage test. Success. October 18th. Break line. Failed. October 20th. Test subject neighbor. Success. Dosage confirmed. October 22nd. Final dinner. 3.5 milligrams digoxin. October 23rd. Call emergency services. Perform grief. She paused. October 30th. Funeral. November 15th. Receive insurance payout. $300,000. December 1st. List house for sale. $750,000. Margaret, she said quietly. They planned your funeral before you were gone. They scheduled their grief. They calculated their profit. I could not speak for a long time. Grace was released from the hospital Saturday afternoon. Despite everything she had been through, she came directly to the police station to give her formal statement. When Sanchez told me, her voice was full of something close to admiration. She said, and I quote, "That girl tried to use me as target practice. I want her prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law." Oh, Grace. I laughed out loud when I heard that, a real laugh, the first one in days, wet and slightly broken but completely real. Sunday brought news from Tacoma. Helen Bryce's body had been exhumed. The results confirmed digoxin toxicity at 3.8 milligrams in bone marrow samples. The suicide note had been forged. Daniel's DNA had been found on a glass in her kitchen. And then Sanchez told me they were reopening 3 additional cases. Elderly women who had passed away under suspicious circumstances between 2015 and 2018. All befriended by financial advisors. All changed their wills shortly before their deaths. How many? I kept thinking. How many women had trusted him, welcomed him into their homes, never knowing what they were really opening the door to. Sunday night I walked through my house alone. I took down every photograph of Sophie, every school picture, every holiday snapshot, every image of the daughter I thought I had raised. I placed them all in a box and sealed it. Maybe someday I would be able to look at them again. Not yet. Christmas came. The first without Sophie. Friends invited me to their celebrations. I declined. I needed to sit with the grief, to mourn what I had lost without the kindness of other people's company covering over the wound before it had finished bleeding. I spent the day going through old photographs. Sophie as a child, gap-toothed and laughing in her school pictures. Her wedding day, radiant in white, her hand in mine before we walked down the aisle. When did I lose you? I kept asking the photographs. Was there a moment I could have stopped this? They gave me no answers. In January, I joined a support group for victims of family abuse. Sitting in that circle, hearing other stories, I understood for the first time that I was not alone. There were dozens of us. Parents betrayed by children. Elders exploited by the people they trusted most. Each one carrying a grief the world did not quite have a name for yet. I made a decision sitting in that circle. After the trial, I would help others. Install security systems. Teach seniors to recognize the signs of financial exploitation. Turn my nightmare into something that might protect someone else. The trial lasted 8 days. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Diana Cole, stood before the jury on the first morning and said, "This is the darkest betrayal. A daughter who looked at her mother and saw not a person, not a parent but a paycheck." Grace took the stand. She wept. She hugged me before she got up there. This 71-year-old woman who had been poisoned through cookies, and she said, "I am going to tell them everything." The footage was played in court. The jury went silent as Sophie's voice filled that room. Next time needs to be the final one. I watched the faces of 12 strangers harden, and I felt something I had not expected. Not relief. Not vindication. Grief. Pure, clean grief for the daughter those jurors were hearing for the first time and I had loved my entire life. When it was my turn to testify, the defense attorney tried to suggest I was confused. Elderly. Forgetful. "You forgot to tell your daughter about the cameras," he said. "I forgot one thing," I replied. That forgetfulness saved my life. If I had told her, I would not be sitting in this chair. He asked me quietly how I felt about my daughter now. I thought of the box in my closet. The sealed photographs. "I mourn the daughter I raised," I said. "The woman sitting in that courtroom, I do not know her anymore." Sophie whispered from across the room, "Mom, don't. You do not have the right to call me that," I said. Day 6. The defense put Sophie on the stand. She cried. She claimed she never wanted to harm me. Her voice broke beautifully. Then the prosecutor played the recording. I should have used more poison. Sophie's composure collapsed. The courtroom fell apart. She screamed at me from the stand. "It is your fault. If you had just died when you were supposed to." The judge called for order. The bailiffs removed her. Day 8. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty. All counts. Both defendants. Sophie collapsed when the verdict was read. I sat still, holding Grace's hand, and felt the silence of something enormous finally ending. The judge sentenced Sophie to 15 years, parole eligible after 12. He turned to Daniel. Serial predator. He said the words like stones being set in concrete. Life without parole, plus 25 additional years for Helen Bryce. As they were led away, Sophie turned and looked at me one final time. "Mom, please, tell them I didn't mean it." I stood. "I will tell them the truth," I said. "You meant every word, every action, every drop. I hope you die alone and miserable," she said. I looked at her for the last time as she was taken through the door. "I would rather die alone," I said, "than at the hands of a daughter who wanted me gone." 6 months later, a letter arrived from the Women's Correctional Facility. I held it for an hour before I could bring myself to open it. "Dear Mom, I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness. Therapy here has made me face what I did. The break line. The poison in the wine. I was drowning in debt and I saw you as a solution, not a person. I have written this letter 47 times. I do not know how to say I am sorry for trying to end your life. I will carry this shame forever. I hope one day you can forgive me. Sophie. I folded the letter and I wept. Not for the woman who had tried to kill me. I wept for the little girl in those sealed photographs. For the child who used to curl up on my sofa and tell me everything. For the version of Sophie that I had loved and raised and lost somewhere along the way without ever seeing it happen. The next day I called Grace. She apologized. I